So welcome on this panel on the latest in hemp research, regulations, and product development. I have the great pleasure to have here on this panel with me today Patrick Attagi, President and CEO of the National Industrial Hemp Council, David Trailer, Senior Managing Director at Golden Eagle Partner, and Bojida Radishik. Yeah, okay. He's an activist for human rights and cannabis as a medicine, an event organizer, project manager, and founder at the Research National Institute. So let's just jump straight in. Maybe start with you, Patrick. You have extensive experience in advocating for the hemp industry in particular. Can you share some insights on the challenges faced by the industry in navigating the patchwork of regulations that apply in industrial hemp and how the NIHC is working to address these challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Eric set the stage, perfectly for this discussion. And one is the plan. The National Industrial Hemp Council was founded in March of 2019. We have a 10-year plan. We've been executing that and have hit our benchmarks in spite of COVID, in spite of the downturn. Because we're very focused on two things. One is consumer safety. So if you come to our booth and meet Lakshmi Mehan, we're working on the NIHC Plus Verify program for testing and third-party certification. And that's the first half of what the NIHC does is consumer safety, making sure that consumers are safe. I used to work for the American Chemistry Council, and my clients were Dow, DuPont, PPG, et cetera, and OxyChemical. And that was during the time of BPA, bisphenol A, and that's where the consumer lost confidence in a perfectly good chemical that was used to make shatterproof bottles, water bottles, et cetera. So that's the first of what NIHC does, and that's what the NIHC Verify program is. The second part is regulatory certainty and working with the government. So we did that. So the reason I'm here is the U.S. Department of Agriculture funds us for the market access program. So we are the only U.S. association that receives federal funding. And that's because the government picks one entity, and we support others. So Global Hemp Association and Hemp Industry Association, we have MOUs with them. Yes, we're in the same space, but we're very different. But the government has said to us, saying, you are the ones that we want to work with, but we bring them along too, so we're the single funding source. I know about other panelists, but just really quickly, so what does that mean? So we get market access program funding. That was the first. That was being able to use federal funds to promote hemp, not cannabis, but hemp. So we're very targeted, and that's why this discussion is hemp and nothing else. So that took 2 years to do. We went through the Office of General Counsel to the USDA, explained to them the difference. You would think, lawyers would know, but there's a lot of nuances. So we achieved that. We received roughly $250,000 there. Next step is getting on the technical assistance for specialty crops. So we have 4 grants through the USDA, and we can talk to folks later about those. And those are life cycle analysis of fiber is one. One is a regulatory analysis of the European market and what are the hurdles and for getting U.S. companies into the U.S. But it's also, I serve on a committee appointed by the Secretary of Agriculture and the U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Tai, and Secretary Vilsack, appointed by both of those agencies, and I serve on the tobacco, cotton, peanut, and now, historically, and monumental, is now hemp. So it's a federal agency, 2 of them, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office and the USDA, and it's now for our efforts, it's tobacco, cotton, peanuts, and hemp committee. We also serve on the products committee and task is also one. We're also trying to get on another one. So yeah, there's ups and downs, but the bottom line is, and in government, the FDA, we all know that, but government is changing and moving forward and funding, and actually funding hemp. With that, I'll stop as we're very limited on time, but I want to focus on the positive that, things are happening. And it's a long term. As Eric said, it's a 10-year plan. It's not a 3 months, 6 months. And that's what we're doing, very slow and steady, moving forward and moving hemp forward.
Also with the farm bill that just changed, can you maybe explain a little bit more about that to the audience, how this affected, this regulation affected everything? and set
Yeah,
the framework?
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And it's the 2018 Farm Bill legalized hemp. That was Senator Mitch McConnell, who was the majority leader at the time from Kentucky. Another association, U.S. Hemp Roundtable, had a very close relationship with him, and we've been pushing it. I was on Capitol Hill. I used to work for a senator in the late 1990s, and I would see this legislation come through. It was from North Dakota farmers, and I think this is perfectly good. But again, as people have noted, the evil weed, the bad, MJ, Mary Jane, and those type of things. But they saw the positives of hemp. And that's where I think it will end up at the end of the day. And my colleagues on the panel will talk about that. It's in F1 racing. It's, automotive was mentioned at 20% in BMW. And it's because why? Bottom line is money, right? It's cheap. It's cheaper than carbon fiber, lighter weight, better fuel efficiency. So I think the long term, yes, hemp is here to stay. It's been here for thousands of years, and only in the United States has been a short time of about 40 years. And I'll just put this in really quickly, since this is business to business. So the opportunity that we see is in Asia, with Thailand opening up their marketplace to legalize hemp, marijuana, cannabis. I think they did it right. And you'll see, the opportunities. You can't import hemp. You can't, that's different, but it's the IP. So that's where we're involved, the National Industry Hemp Council. We funded the 2022 Asian Hemp Expo. There's a 2023 Asian Hemp Expo. If you want to see excitement, that's where you need to go. Japan. Japan is changing its laws on hemp. Right now, there's really only one farmer who can grow it, and it's used for ceremonial use for the emperor's clothing. But we've been in contact with the U.S. Embassy, with the Japanese government, and you're going to see that changing. That goes into discussion of the 0.2%, 0.3%, and those are questions they were asking. But we've partnered with, for those who are interested in funding, AWR Lloyd. They're about the size for the Canadians, about a McKinsey or Bain, bringing companies into Asia. So this is B2B, so we're going to have that conversation there. PE, private equity, but also just the regulatory getting into those countries. So I want to be positive, and I want to provide people that opportunity. So I hope that answered your question. But the Farm Bill is happening. So it legalizes in 2018. To the answer to the question, hopefully it's 1% that what we're pushing for. 31 organizations were getting together in the United States. First time that's ever happened. And it's just working together works is our slogan. And when we do work together, things happen.
That's very true. David, having advised cannabis companies for several years, what are some of the key regulatory challenges that you see that companies are facing in terms of research and product development, maybe in particular with regard to hemp, or as you call it, THC minus cannabis?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so when we're saying cannabis, as Lisa said, if you saw me, we are a global investor forum. We put together cannabis as a genus. So we consider, marijuana, people don't like that term, so we're calling it THC plus, THC minus. But frankly, the regulatory hurdles are a problem. A couple of things. One, the regulators, frankly, don't know what they're doing. And I can speak for that because, for example, we had the interim final rule, which in itself speaks to kind of what government is about, and I can kind of say that because both my parents were politicians. But as far as one thing you can say is, like, for example, the FDA. Well, maybe let me step back and talk about the Farm Bill that went through. Before I get to talking about the authorities, one of the problems is the fact that not everybody gets the memo, right? So, for example, we had the 2018 Farm Bill passed in December 2018, right? So I had a hemp client based in Colorado that ordered a shipment from Kentucky, and if you're from the States, you might remember this, January 2019, it's going through Oklahoma, the truck runs a stoplight, and the cops pull it over, and they look in the back, and they think it's the biggest drug bust in history, right? And so it turns out the truck drivers got thrown in jail. Then they end up testing, so it gives you an idea of the arbitrariness of all this stuff. They go ahead and test the truckload, and probably I think half of it wasn't hot, right? Because it's supposed to be hemp, but then they test, certain buds or parts of it, and it's hot because it's over 0.3%, so they consider it hot. It turns out our client didn't get that truckload for another 18 months, and they ended up suing the state of Oklahoma. But the other thing, as far as the regulatory authorities go, it is just, it's tough, because if you know the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia, they recently had a proclamation in late 2020 that said, okay, we're done with, this mess with CBD and medicinal cannabis down under, so what we're gonna allow is you can produce a drug with 150 milligrams CBD or less. And as most people know, that usually is probably not going to deliver the effect. So they allow this, but then they kind of pull it back. And if you talk to a lot of the leading scientists like Hunter Land, he thinks it's just totally arbitrary. And then you have the FDA's recent proclamation that came out and essentially said, as everybody knows, CBD in the US is ruled as a drug because of the Epidiolex precedent, right? So now CBD is a drug, it can't be used in anything else. Now the FDA's recently come out saying, okay, well, if you have a product in wellness and everything else, it can't be used. If it's CBD, it has to run through a clinical process unless it's a vape product. So if you have a vape product with CBD, they're not going to try to shut that down, or if you can get CBD from a dispensary. So again, the regulatory hurdles tend to be pretty substantial because they tend to be arbitrary.
Thank you. But that's a good bridge also to you, Bozita. What progress have you witnessed in terms of acceptance and understanding of cannabis and also maybe hemp as a legitimate medical options? And are there any particular challenges that still need to be addressed in order to further advance the use of cannabis or hemp for medicinal purposes?
Yeah, as my colleague said, on this field is complete confusion inside the EU that even we don't mention the word, So it's really very hard to deal nationally and internationally. I think the key is the education of general public and professionals, because they only can push. We tried many years now, like activists, but if it doesn't come the impulse from the doctors and nurses, I don't think it will change very soon. But the problem is that before they start to treat cannabis as it should be, it will be another 10 years, at least, because cannabis is not in curriculum, not in the medical schools, not a bit now in the Faculty of Pharmacy in Slovenia, but still, I think, only through education. And the problem with cannabis is mostly bureaucratic obstacles and over-regulation before it even comes to the market.
That's very true. I mean, you are a part of, you have a human rights organization, FIST, but you're also a member of IACM. Do you see any other aspects other than education, like access programs, for example, for patients, even maybe for hemp-based medicine? I think it's like we have this big part where a lot of people are using CBD lifestyle products as medicines, potentially. Yeah, is there also a gap in your opinion?
So the gap is now that people get more and more informed about it. But I think that the cannabis as a plant, as genus, should be allowed also with all other compounds, because I think just talking about the CBD and health, it's about a little bit hypocritic, because we all know how the endocannabinoid system works. But again, in this rigid situation, especially inside the EU, I don't see very bright future. You see what is happening in Portugal, in France, all over the Europe. So let's see what will happen.
Yeah, it gets more complicated every day. Patrick, let's jump back to you. What are some impacts of the current regulations, and how are they impacting, for example, cultivation, processing, the sale of hemp products? and how can the industry adapt to these varying limits of THC globally and ensure compliance while maximizing the potential of hemp-based products?
Yeah, absolutely. Locally, it's a mess, to be perfectly honest with you. For example, to do research in New York, you need to pay for your crop to be tested, $300. You need to be fingerprinted. This is for the farmer. So for Cornell University, Ivy League school, top agricultural higher education in the country, they're having a difficult time, getting product, through to be tested or to be, worked on for their research. That's just one example. There's just a patchwork, as we talked about, of regulations and rules and laws, and they're ever changing. And even interstate, we talked about the trucking, interstate transportation. That's not even getting into the pesticide, herbicide use requirements by the Environmental Protection Agency, because you can use it on one crop doesn't mean you can use it on another. Every state has a different rule, and then overall, federally, if it's hot, it's illegal and it's a Class 1 drug. And, there's the social impact to that. And as has been mentioned before, why is marijuana, cannabis a Class 1 drug? And, it's because you can easily arrest people of a certain demographic and put them in jail. That's that part. So it's very, very difficult. That being said, what is an answer? Universities are looking at countries like Thailand, right? Because you can go there, you can do the research, inexpensive for labor, you don't have to worry about having a hot crop. So they're finding ways to, I don't want to say get around, but to be able to do their research. And I keep pointing to Asia because it's very, very different. And when I was there last year in Bangkok, the comment was, the marijuana, and we all know those strict regulations of being caned or even executed for drug trafficking. But they said, but that's a U.S. That was U.S. based in the 1940s, 1950s at the United Nations. And, we went along because that's what the U.S. wanted. And now they're saying, but you know what? We use cannabis. We've used it for thousands of years. I mean, even when it was illegal, so to speak, farmers out in the countryside were using it. They don't have the issue of cross-pollination contamination because marijuana is grown in one part of the country because of the climate and the altitude, and hemp is grown in another, and they look totally different. So, in the U.S., yeah, it's a mess, and hopefully it gets straightened out in the Farm Bill some. 31 other organizations are pushing for 1%. And hopefully some other things happen along those lines. So I think the opportunities are amazing. They're out there and just going to the right place at the right time, and they'll find a way. And it's a finance-driven proposal, and I do think Asia is where you're going to see a lot of this happening. When we look around and say, well, the market's up and down, but if you look at from where it was legal and you take out the highs and lows, right? Overall, it's an upward climb. It's not steep, but it's a very slow and steady. And that's where I think, we need to be, is you need to be slow and steady and think about it and build, just as our organization has been slow and steady in building. And we have a very good reputation, and I don't say that just because I'm here saying it, but the proof is, in the taste in the pudding, is that, we do get government grants. We are on government committees, and we are getting government funding. So, long answer to your short question, it's a hot mess in the United States, as everybody's been saying, but there's opportunity, and it's being at the right place at the right time, and I think Asia is that.
Thank you. David, you have your background in biotech, and you have been working in this background for quite some, like in the past. Where do you see an overlap or an interest also from conventional industry in the commodity hemp?
Well, yeah, thank you, Lisa. The one thing that's really kind of funny about this, actually, is this panel actually should be one of the most interesting, well-attended panels. And the reason why I say that is if you look at cannabis again, right? You define it as essentially, well, everybody knows the typical cannabis plant has what, 500 compounds, 150 cannabinoids. And then you have the flavonoids, the terpenes, all these different, and these molecules are amazing, right? So we have all these molecules that we've really not understood what they do, and then you have on the other side, it's a three-pronged wheel, right? You have all the molecules here, you have all the indications, potential indications that could be used, and then you have the human genetic side, right? Because everybody has metabolized a lot of these molecules differently, because I know that. I used to work at a company called Affymetrix. They were one of the first companies to coin the term pharmacogenomics. And the reason why I say that this should be the most interesting panel is, let's take out one of those molecules, which is delta-9 THC, right? And that's what, that molecule determines a lot of these regulations, right? And so you take that molecule out, then you have CBC, CBG, CBN, we could go on for a long time, right? And then a lot of these terpenes. And so if you really look at the potential of this plant and you take out THC, this whole experiment, and to us, it's the holy grail. The holy grail is to find out which of these molecules, or by themselves or in combination, are effective for treating an given indication. Like, for example, one of our clients is a public company in Australia. They're trying to run a pivotal trial with CBD and insomnia, right? That's kind of low-hanging fruit. But then you have CBC. I've taken CBC, cannabichromene recently. So it's kind of interesting that, yeah, if you talk about the science side, there's a lot of science to be applied, and hopefully next year this is more of an well-attended panel, because I think, to me, that's where the future of this is going to go. It's not just going to be dependent on THC. Delta-9, that is. Now, Delta-8 might be a different story.
So let's get back to you, Bojida. Is there any research that has caught your attention recently? Where would you say any specific areas in research that you believe hold great promise for the future?
Cannabis is the most researched plant on the planet, like 150,000 studies in the last 40 years. Actually not, but I hope there will be very soon that somebody or something could work on the, how to modulate human endocannabinoid system with cannabis. I think this is the key, and this should be the key research. So we don't develop the special cannabinoid for each disease, but how the best modulate the endocannabinoid system. I think this should be the key, because we all know now how the endocannabinoid system works, and I hope we will have methods in the near future to measure the levels and the activities in the human body.
How do you think are these confused regulations that we have been talking before, are they impacting us as an industry also?
Yes, of course. Especially, we are running a lab in Ljubljana, and we have to follow all the regulations as for drug trafficking. Even if we buy, 1 gram of standard THC standard, you have to fulfill the all regulations, like you will, be drug trafficker. And this is very hard then. Then another one is exchange of the samples between the laboratories. It's very hard, because if you cannot send Delta-9, you can, but it's a lot of paperwork. So there are many obstacles on the way, yes.
If I could add one thing to that real quick, that we're talking about research regulations. One of the big problems has been the stigma, right? So, for example, let's take a good example with biotech, right? So Watson and Crick elucidate the structure with a lot of help from Rosalind Franklin, right? 1973, Cohen and Boyer developed recombinant DNA technology, which really spawns a whole industry, right? Which then spawns Genentech, which goes public 5 years later in '78. And then a couple years later, we have human recombinant insulin. So getting back to Professor's earlier comment, let's look at the fact that you have Rafi Meshulam, God rest his soul, what a star, finds Delta-9 in the mid-'60s, I think it's 64, 65. and then we don't find and determine that we have an endocannabinoid system until 93 or 92, right? And then that is how long ago? We had Marinol was really not a, it's an analog on the market, which really hasn't done a whole lot. So the potential of this industry is, I think, really been held back, not only regulations, but stigma. And the potential, if we can unlock that and unwrap that, it's going to be really exciting next 10 years.
Thank you.
Maybe I just want to add something. When they discovered or isolated insulin, it was 1 year from isolation to the medical use. And we know about the endocannabinoid system for 30 years, and nothing happens really. There are interests, obviously.
A lot more things could happen, maybe like this.
But I really liked your question, though, like what technology is out there and why is it different? I mean, we have a video that shows rope and those type of things and sales. It's like, well, even if you replaced everything with hemp, it still really wouldn't make a dent, right? But the technology is different now, right? Looking at it, the most recent that came out a few weeks ago was being used in road construction because of the high tensile strength of hemp fiber. And you think, wow, we're not going to make roads out of hemp, but it's a part of it. It's like ethanol in fuel. It's a percentage. It's in clothing. It may not be 100% hemp, but it's going to be a blend, and you have that. Technology, really cool stuff is batteries. The carbon structure, people, hemp and batteries, but if you read into it, it's that it replaces the heavy metals and lithium ion batteries, and that carbon structure is very similar. So you reduce the cost significantly. So really, it's as a commodity, yes, yes, you have the CBD, but it's like comparing apples on a tree to pine and hardwood. They're very different for different uses. Sure, you can use wood from an apple tree, but for industrial use, that's not what you're using. So I do think for the very long term that hemp is here, hemp is to stay, and we're only in it for a very short time, for the United States anyway, for other countries longer, but it has established itself. It will be here. It will grow, and as a commodity, as others have noted in their presentations, I really think that's where the end day hemp will really succeed.
Thank you. So we have time for one more question, but maybe let's have a round of applause for the panelists before. Are there any questions from the audience? No?
Hi, hello. My name is Eli. I'm from Tel Aviv. I have a clinic in Israel with approximately 6,000 patients that we aid. And I wanted to ask Mr. Bojidar, we have heard that you are working with suppositories, and there's been talking and laughing about this subject, this convention so many times. And I've been hearing there's so much things going on with this kind of curing of people, and I feel like there's not a lot of knowledge. Do you think your lab can cooperate with other labs and even bring that knowledge and that technique? Because if you can tell the audience about the technique, it's amazing, and it's curing cancer and a lot of disease, and I haven't seen a lot of techniques like that at doing that. I would love to hear from you if it's something that is possible.
Well,
maybe
yes,
a little bit about that.
We help people with this. That was the point why we established institute and the laboratory. So we monitor also what people are taking from black market or whatever for their safety, actually. And yes, we also teach. It's nothing new in Slovenia because we also teach patients how to take cannabis properly on the different occasions. We have lectures like Association for Multiple Sclerosis or tetraplegic associations and so on. And people or general public in Slovenia is very much aware of those benefits, So I wonder why it's not that much popular overseas, like in the States or Israel, but in Europe or in Slovenia or in our area, it's very common. And yes, people have also very good results with many different diseases.
Yeah, I heard better results. So what's making it so?
We don't know.
What's the magic?
Well, we don't
It's
know.
magic.
It's magic, and I think it's a better bioavailability of cannabinoids for the human body.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the program today.
Thank you all so very much.